please.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Warren. My first question is directed to you. In Nanticoke, which is a town just a few minutes away from where I live, there's a steel mill company called Stilco that employs thousands of workers and drives our local economy. These are the same workers that are suffering and battling unjustified U.S. tariffs. Now with the $1 billion taxpayer-funded ferry contract being handed to a Chinese state yard, it feels like a slap in the face from the Liberal Party. So, Mr. Warren, could the Canadian steel producers like Stilco have supplied the steel required for these ferries if these ferries had been built in Canada?
There's definitely steel producers in Canada that can produce it. The Nanticoke, what we call the lake operation, I'm not sure. I know Algoma that is in big trouble and on their knees right now. Just it's so fragile in the Soo. They have a history of doing it. The other thing we need support with, whatever steel, I think most steel manufacturers could do it. But to do a one-off is difficult. We need a commitment and maybe investment in technology to change the process so we can do it. But my answer to your question is yes, that steel for those ships could have been provided by Canadian producers.
Thank you for that answer. Now, you spoke about the economic activity in your opening. Could you expand on things like including the fabrication, the transport, the downstream supply chains? Did Canada forfeit? What level of this did Canada forfeit by sending these jobs offshore?
Well, I think that's such an important question because it forfeited many jobs. I can't list them all, but the supply chain is just as important as for argument's sake, the steel itself, the ship itself. There is many jobs, many communities that, something like the auto industry, quite frankly, has so many other links in Canada, if we do it right, that many communities, many workers can benefit from shipbuilding through the supply chain. Meg, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I think that's essentially it. Is that we do we do lose out on those jobs, and so that's the importance of having a bold industrial strategy where we're not going to lose out on these because we've lost that capacity or we haven't maintained it or built it, and so it needs to be brought into that larger capacity and looking beyond just defense and looking to for commercial ships and ferries and things like that as well.
So it's fair to say that Canada lost thousands of unionized jobs for steelworkers that would have been related to this contract. Now, given that some of your very union members would have paid taxes that went to this billion-dollar contract that was doled out by the CIB and that was not, and which the Liberal Party did not intervene to stop it, do you believe that the BC Ferries and the CIB could have structured the loan procurement rules to require Canadian steel content and Canadian jobs, ensuring that the domestic jobs and industrial capacity is supported rather than going to our competitors?
Yes, I think that is exactly what could have been done and should have been done. And to your original point, when we just race to the bottom for the cheapest price, what we really do lose is the taxpayer base. A lot of these jobs are good jobs, raise a family, perhaps own a home, retire in dignity. And when that work isn't provided to Canadians, we lose the tax base. We lose the tax base for hospitals, education, infrastructure. So you got to look at more than the bottom line as we move forward.
And it's not just to this generation that we're losing. This is the loss of generational capacity and opportunity to strengthen our industry and shipbuilding industry. And this opportunity was effectively handed to the Chinese-owned shipyard. Can you speak about the loss of generational capacity?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Eric McNeely mentioned it too. It's generational in terms of, especially in the steel industry, we have many generations in it. And in many of our, whether it be mining or other sectors, industrial sectors, it's passed down or it's generational. And again, in this here economy and with the tariff threat, it's so important we do everything for our future generations. One of the first steps we can do is protect our domestic market, create a domestic market where we don't have it. And the biggest point that Eric made, I believe, is, and even Meg made it, is when these skills leave, when these industries leave, most of them aren't coming back. We've lost it for the rest of generations to come.
Oh, that's so sad. Very, very sad for Canada. So we have an infrastructure bank in Canada, and Section 3 mandates and requires that investments generate social and economic benefit for Canadians. In your opinion, does $1 billion taxpayer-funded loan to China for these ferries exclude Canadian workers and supply benefits? Would you say that mandate was reached in providing economic and social benefit to Canada?
It was a complete failure. What could have been done, and not only set up for the first, I think, 2 to 4 ships, there's another 14 coming. We could have invested in the infrastructure where we were lack it to do it ourselves and provided good paying jobs for tax base and our communities. It was a debacle, as I said, a failure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis, and thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses, especially those that are up at the well before the crack of dawn, actually. Although as a morning person, I appreciate it. And let me just note up front that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank approval of the loan on March 5th, 2005, took place at a time when we already had the looming threat of tariffs on Canadian steel. That was evident already at that time. And yet, yet this went ahead, and really the government was not straight with Canadians about the process and the timeline for which that happened, and it really didn't come to light till June. And so, the question really should be asked of what can all levels of government do. Yes, this was a provincial procurement, but there's a role, and I think that's being fleshed out here in the testimony, for a Canadian industrial strategy. And, so that is something the federal government has a direct role in. I would note that in September, the early part of September, there was a summit in Hamilton, being a Hamilton area MP, and having been to Stelco many times. This summit was at Dofasco, and it was entitled Made in Canada, Ferries and Rail Summit. I mean, how ironic that would be the title of a summit taking place after $1 billion in taxpayer funds were subsidizing the construction of ferries in China. May I ask the United Steelworkers, were you invited to that summit?
Yes, we were invited, and I did attend virtually. And that's another example where federal and provincial governments, through consultation, to bring industries together to talk about big projects, to talk about how they may have to invest or do change their process a little bit, to be involved. Because what I seen there was a lot of connecting the dots. In terms of different industries connecting, and I just think we could talk about procurement, and that is so important, but the step after procurement is to work with sectors and industries to get them in the room to talk about the process and who can do what and how can we. So anyways, I thought the summit was good in terms of just seeing a lot of businesses, quite frankly, connect the dots.
And I mean, that's not new. I mean, I've met with the USW before, and you've talked often about, and as you did today, about the essential role of the steel industry in the Canadian economy, in any economy, and that investment in infrastructure in Canada should be using Canadian steel. Similar to Mr. Barceló-Duval, I actually had the opportunity to visit a shipyard recently, Ontario Shipyards, which are located on the Hamilton Port, as well as in Port Weller in St. Catharines, and they were also at that summit as well. And so here we have a local shipbuilder who has capabilities that could be part of that industrial strategy, that could be part of building this out, and they were out of the loop. They're actually not part of the national shipbuilding strategy, and so that's an oversight for sure. Any comments on that? On because they use local labor, they use local steel in what they do. So both from Mr. Warren and Mr. McNeely, any comments on that?
Sure, I think we get the industry we planned for, and no one planned to keep this work in Canada. Two Canadian shipyards did look at the bid for the new major vessels, and they walked away because it was clear that the lowest price would win. And domestic yards can't compete with state-subsidized shipyards offering rock-bottom labor costs. So if the system rewards the cheapest option, that's exactly what we're going to get. And we should be proud that Canadian jobs and Canadian quality are high, and that's not a detriment. It's a positive, and it's something we worked for together as a country for more than 100 years, which should encompass all the yards. And I think there's an opportunity for big yards and small yards to work together if there is a national approach to building ferries. Over to you, Marty.
Let me jump in with one last question because I see I've got the yellow card. So you mentioned, Mr. Warren, that only 35% of domestic steel is used. I mean, obviously, one of the existential threats, other than the U.S. tariffs, is the dumping, and China is, of course, one of the biggest, most egregious offenders of that. And so, maybe just to elaborate a little bit more on here we have a Chinese company getting Canadian taxpayers' dollars using Chinese steel as opposed to Canadian steel.
Yeah, it's just outrageous, especially during these. There's the red card.
Apologies. Thank you very much, Mr. Warren, and perhaps another member will provide you with an opportunity to finish your response. Thank you very much, Mr. Muse. Next will